Please welcome back to the stage, Laura Chase.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. I hope everybody had a fantastic day yesterday, learned something new, made new connections and partners, and maybe even enjoyed some time out and about in Dallas. We have another very busy day planned, and I'm pleased to see we have great attendance here this morning. We have a great session for you on the keynote stage. And then please take time to see the plenitude of sessions, demos, exhibits, all across the floor to see the rapid pace of innovation in our industry. So yesterday I asked, what is your plan to implement innovation with a clear focus on safety? And today, while safety is always a focus, we're also going to have a discussion about sustainable and equitable mobility. And I want to lift up the words of ITS America Chair Monali Shah, who was on the keynote stage yesterday during the panel. And she talked about, the zip code you live in shouldn't determine if you have clean air to breathe, fresh water to drink, or access to safe and efficient, clean transportation. Safe communities shouldn't be a lottery to be won by zip code. It should be something we all aspire to create. That's why I was so glad to hear the announcement yesterday by Robert Hampshire about the Safe Intersection Challenge. And he pushed us to deploy technologies in underserved communities, to deploy technologies that can enhance safety in all of our communities. For decades, we've built a system that values communities differently. But in 2023, with the resources from the bipartisan infrastructure law, we have an opportunity to make decisions about how to invest in the future and build intentionally and integrate technology to serve people better. Because the impact of a system that doesn't serve all isn't just measured in fatal accidents, as I mentioned yesterday. It's measured in the frustration of a woman who misses a doctor's appointment for her child because the transportation system just inherently doesn't work for caregivers. It's measured in hundreds of missed opportunities, whether they be jobs that can't be accepted because the commute is just too far, or a school that they can't attend because the system just won't get them there in time. It's measured in higher rates of asthma in communities who bear the brunt of poor air quality. We know these things, and we have the ability to fix them. So like yesterday, I want you to think not only about how can you save lives, but how can we improve lives through increased access and opportunity? Because we have the tools to make a difference. Our next speaker puts tremendous thought into how to make our transportation safer, more sustainable, and more equitable. She has a distinguished career serving leaders on Capitol Hill, serving in the Obama administration as Assistant Secretary and Undersecretary for Policy at US DOT, and serving as Commissioner of New York City DOT, overseeing the nation's largest transportation network, where she also implemented the city's Vision Zero program. It is my pleasure. Please welcome to the stage Deputy Secretary Polly Trottenberg.
Good morning. It is great to see everyone. It is great to be here in Texas and to be part of this incredible ITSA conference. Thank you, Laura, and the whole team for putting it together. I also want to say how thrilled I am to be here with so many of my DOT colleagues, including Dr. Robert Hampshire, our Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administrator, Robin Hutchison, Morteza Farigian, Martin Knopp, Cheryl Walker, and so many others. Since Laura gave a little bit of my bio, I just want to note my long working relationship with ITSA during now 2 administrations and my time as Commissioner of Transportation in New York City, where I got to work with ITSA on developing and deploying a whole range of technologies innovations, from advanced roadway infrastructure and data analytics to micromobility programs to our own V2V pilot project. ITSA has always been a great partner at the local, state, and federal level. And that's why it's not surprising that the theme of this year's conference, Implementing Innovation for All, really resonates with us at USDOT for a number of reasons. I'll start with implementation. We are now well into the 3rd year of implementing the bipartisan infrastructure law with $1.2 billion in resources, and it's been one of our central focuses. In year 1, as a lot of you know, we worked with key allies, both in Congress and in our stakeholder community, including ITSA and many of you in this room, to pass the bill, which we view as the largest and most important infrastructure bill in modern history. And we did it with support from both sides of the aisle, which is something we're very proud of. In year 2, we at USDOT worked diligently to design and stand up over 40 new discretionary grant programs throughout the department. And as I think a lot of you know, we ran dozens of competitive programs and made hundreds of billions of dollars available in formula and discretionary funds to states, localities, tribes, transit agencies, ports, airports, and railroads. Over 23,000 projects so far and counting. But now in year 3, we need to deliver on the unprecedented resources at our disposal. This means working with our partners, public and private, all across the country to implement projects, to get shovels in the ground, or I think as may be more fitting for this conference, get cables run, sensors installed, apps online, data analytics fired up. For us, year 3 is shaping up to be an incredibly exciting year, one where we'll have extraordinary opportunities to invest in and promote new technologies and innovations that'll make our transportation system, as Laura said, safer, greener, more accessible, and we hope more efficient and affordable. And that's where I think the second part of the conference tagline, "For All," comes in. We also have an opportunity and an obligation to make this exciting, forward-leaning work deliver benefits equitably, with a particular focus on low-income communities and communities of color. It's why it's so important to advance new transportation technologies with both public and private sector input and expertise aligned towards making the goal of having it work for all. As we all know, and I know many of you in this room are entrepreneurs and innovators, the private sector drives a lot of innovation. I do always like to remind everybody that a lot of the transportation innovations have really derived from GPS technology, was created and now currently managed by the federal government. But we all know the private sector has the ability to spare no expense in hiring the best talent, to move fast, to experiment, and to fail repeatedly in ways that, honestly, we in the public sector cannot. But the public sector brings innovation too. We have some extraordinary leaders, again, including our very own Dr. Robert Hampshire, and we bring, especially at this time, robust resources. We also bring a responsibility to ensure that our resources invest in projects and technologies that will bring benefits to all communities, especially those that the private sector does not always look to first. I want to take a minute to walk through some of the areas where DOT and the Biden administration see the tremendous potential for innovation and equity to succeed together, where both public and private sectors can and must collaborate. First, and I know it's always a theme at ITSA conferences, safety. At a time when our nation is facing an epidemic of roadway fatalities, nearly 43,000 annually. And tragically, those fatalities fall disproportionately in communities of color, tribal communities, and rural communities. So saving lives on our roadways will always be a top focus for us at USDOT. And roadway safety, as we all know, is an area where technology holds so much promise in vehicle design and infrastructure and in better operations, and an area where we know ITSA has long played a really crucial role. We've worked together on vehicle technologies from automated vehicles to V2V, V2I, and V2X, and exciting innovations that work is spurring in sensor and camera technology and data analytics. Other safety technologies continue to improve and spread, such as advanced driver assistance programs like lane keeping, emergency braking, and pedestrian detection. And I know you heard from my colleague Robin Hutchison yesterday in her wonderful presentation what a huge impact those safety technologies are already having in the trucking sector, and particularly for truck drivers. For the Biden administration, a second key area, decarbonizing and electrifying the transportation sector. Back in the Obama administration, some of you may recall, DOT had a partnership with EPA and HUD called Partnership for Sustainable Communities. But in those years, we did not interact that much with the Department of Energy. Fast forward now to the Biden administration, and I'm proud to say that DOT and DOE are joined at the hip as we're working together to tackle climate change and decarbonize every mode of transportation. But our particular focus at this time is electric vehicles. We've formed the first ever Joint Office of Transportation and Energy led by Gabe Klein. And for some of you, you may not realize this is kind of a first in the federal government. Typically, two agencies, we tend to be a little stovepiped in how we operate. To come together, form a joint office, bring our different strengths to the table has been a really exciting experiment. And we've needed it because we are now implementing what I believe is the world's most ambitious effort to create a national EV charging network with $7.5 billion in bill funding. The work is well underway, with $5 billion allotted to state DOTs to build out Level 3 charges along the interstates, and a $2.5 billion discretionary grant program, the Charging and Fueling Infrastructure Program, colloquially known as CFI, which is available to a really broad set of applicants. Both programs rely on partnerships between the public and private sector, and in both, we've made equity a key focus. We want to be sure that EV charging infrastructure can be available in all communities who want it, that all communities have input in planning its deployment, and that underserved communities will see the jobs and contracting opportunities out of these dollars. So far, it has been amazing to see the broad interest in EVs across the countries, and not always where you'd expect. Two of the most impressive state plans have come from Oklahoma and Tennessee. There is really innovative work going on in every corner of the country. And we're also very excited to see what kind of proposals will come in under the CFI program. Particularly, we want to see innovations in the urban context, where charging infrastructure may not only be for EVs, but to power public transit and micromobility options like e-bikes and scooters. We're also working with our partners at EPA to electrify the nation's school bus fleet, and our own FTA has made major investments in low and no emission buses, which, as we all know, especially help reduce emissions in hotspots, which are often in low-income communities and communities in color. Third key area, access and efficiency, which is one of the big areas we're supporting with our grant programs. And I know you've heard about it from Dr. Hampshire. We have been so excited about all the technologies that are being developed, and I know some of them are being displayed out here in the expo floor. Technologies that are making it easier to pay for transit, tolls, parking, and micromobility. Technologies that are providing transit riders with better, more accessible real-time information and enabling transit systems to better serve their customers with on-demand responsive transit routing. Beyond transportation, we're excited about adaptable smart infrastructure that can facilitate conversion of right-of-way to enhance pedestrian safety and placemaking. We think these types of innovations will provide opportunities to create safer, more sustainable, and more equitable transportation systems, and also help drive economic growth, enliven streets, and revitalize downtowns. But let me now turn to what we're doing at DOT to spur investments in some of these key areas. I'm proud to note that we are making the largest ever public investment in transportation technology and intelligent transportation systems, the digital infrastructure that I know was discussed here yesterday, after many years of underinvestment that I know has at times been frustrating for this community. It's been a political truism that it's hard to get elected officials excited about digital infrastructure. Laura herself said it yesterday, that these are not the types of projects you can cut ribbons on, but I think times are changing, and I think we're certainly seeing a lot more interest amongst public officials. While many of the 23,000 infrastructure projects I noted involve technology, innovations, and upgrades, at DOT we're especially excited about two new 5-year programs Dr. Hampshire's running that we think will capture public attention. We'll have over $800 million to invest in two of our new programs, the SMART program, Strengthening Mobility and Revolutionizing Transportation, and ATTAIN, Advanced Transportation Technology and Innovation. We love long, wordy acronyms in the federal government. Sorry about that. Last month, DOT was proud to announce nearly $100 million in SMART grants to 59 communities across the country. And the grants fell, we think, into three major buckets. First, of course, safety, including a number of projects to enhance pedestrian safety, safety at intersection, and safety for roadway workers. Communities from Illinois to southern Nevada are working on making real-time data accessible, again, to improve work zone safety and to improve the optimization of transit and emergency vehicles. Second big bucket for us, transit innovation, with projects that support transit signal priority, innovative payment systems, and new data approaches to help riders plan trips in rural communities. These kind of innovations are especially important as we're trying to bring riders back to transit systems in the wake of the pandemic. Santa Clara Valley Transportation Authority is doing a new reliability program that will install smart traffic signals to keep buses moving and make intersections safer. In Georgia, the Chatham Area Transit System will be deploying an on-demand multimodal transportation system, introducing first-mile, last-mile microtransit to their existing fixed-route paratransit system in the Savannah area. Finally, the last bucket for us, using technology to better manage and monitor the built environment, something I thought a lot about in my time as Transportation Commissioner in New York. This includes projects that deploy drones and sensors to inspect infrastructure. Another project involves cohorts of cities across the country that will be working on methods for better managing curb space across its many uses like parking, pickup, drop-off, and delivery. One great grant we're doing in the city of Buffalo is using one to support smarter curbside utilization. They'll be doing a public-private partnership to install sensors and software technology to monitor the curb in real time. In the coming days, in addition to that first round of SMART grants, we're anticipating announcing a new slate of grants totaling more than $50 million through our ATTAIN program. This program will also support payment innovation, transit signal prioritization, and environmental sensing. I want to also just highlight again something I know Robert and Robin talked about yesterday, our new intersection safety challenge, something that we're very excited about. I think as some people in this room know, we have over 10,000 people a year dying in traffic crashes at intersection. It's a real epidemic. I'm personally excited to see what kinds of new innovations are going to come through this program. We're calling again, as you've heard, on industry, innovators, and academia to develop the most innovative intersection safety solutions, and particularly want to make sure that they're affordable and so we can deploy them at scale across the country in a few short years. We think that these new technologies, coupled with some of the major investments we're making through programs like Safe Streets and Roads for All, can have really meaningful benefits and bring down that tragic number of fatalities and fatal injuries. We have a booth at the ITS hallway here, and I do hope you'll all go and learn more about the opportunity. I want to just sort of close by noting that we have a lot of resources now available to engage with this community. Our online DOT Navigator, our Net Council, our Thriving Communities Tech Cluster, and our Smart Community Resource Center. And of course, we have many of our experts here at this conference. So let me just close with two final thoughts. At DOT, from our secretary on down, we do believe in the promise of technology to make transportation safer, more equitable, more sustainable, and more accessible. We also believe that public-private partnerships that are being developed are essential to delivering that promise, and that's why you see so many of us here to learn and partner with many of you. So with that, I want to thank you all for having me, and I look forward to everything we can accomplish together. Thank you.
The Deputy Secretary has graciously agreed to answer a few questions. Excuse me. Thank you. Well, thank you for those remarks. It's really wonderful to have the Deputy Secretary here with us. I do want to just highlight that this is the first time in an ITS America annual meeting that we've had 2 female keynote speakers, so I feel like that deserves a round of applause. So thank you for being one of our female speakers.
For an organization, let's see if this mic works.
Oh, I think your lab is...
Well, I would want two female keynote speakers for an organization run by a woman as well.
Exactly.
So there you go. Give a hand for Laura.
So one question I want to ask, and I'm glad you mentioned, my comment about it's hard to cut a ribbon on a technology deployment, and I want to hear a little bit about your experience in New York City when you had the V2V or the V2X pilot. If you can tell us about how you managed that and how you managed to get some public support.
Yeah, I was very fortunate. We were able to win, back then when I was Transportation Commissioner in New York, a $20 million grant from US DOT to do a V2V pilot. There was awards also in Wyoming and Florida. And we thought about how can we explain to the public how exciting this is? And we were very fortunate. We had then Transportation Secretary Anthony Fox came to New York, and we took him to our traffic management center, which for those of you who are in sort of the press side of the house was a very good visual. At any given moment, all the cameras in New York City and the Traffic Management Center are showing various crashes and backups and other things happening. And so we got a lot of press interest because I think it was a way of visualizing the technology. And just a little footnote to the story, I was asked that night to go on a local kind of call-in show in New York's public cable channel, New York One, and it's a show where sort of very regular folks call in, and the phone lines were burning up with people calling. Some people very excited about the technology, but a lot of people also very anxious about it. Anxious about, are there going to be all these alert systems in the car that are going to be distracting? I feel like technology is taking over our lives. It was an interesting lesson. As we got a lot of publicity out of it, we also got a lot of real, I think, on-the-ground public feedback about how those of us can be very excited in this technology space, but sometimes I think for regular folks, it's a lot to take in.
No, that's a great reminder for our community. USDOT has put a real priority on community engagement for any grants, and that obviously includes technology grants. And we have a higher bar, I believe, in our industry when we're talking about technology to really explain that to the community and bring them in so that they can actually understand it and then actually even be an advocate for it and share their concerns when there are concerns. So I want to turn to one final question, which is, I know you hear this all the time, we hear this too, is what can I do as an agency to effectively compete for grants? You know, what is USDOT looking for? How can I be the most prepared as possible?
It's a great question, and I think you all, at the end of my speech, sort of mentioned, first of all, the many online resources we have, and I urge you to take the time and look at what we've got. Plus, we also have online a lot of webinars. I'm very proud of the team. I think we have really, I think we've really put a lot of effort into trying to make, a lot of good things online to explain all our programs, get into the details. But I also know sometimes there's no substitute for face-to-face conversations. We have a whole technical assistance team, and you heard from Morteza yesterday and a project finance team. Our door is open for everyone to come in, please, and talk through your needs. But I would also just say, as you are preparing applications, the biggest problem we're seeing is project readiness. Projects come to us, they haven't really thought through the details, the design, they don't have their local match worked out. If there is community work to be done, sometimes that isn't complete. It is a better use of your time and a better use of our time if you get the project really ready before you come in the door. There's sometimes a perception, well, we'll get a little federal money and then that will help kind of make everything happen. It has to be a little bit the opposite. You've got to have things pretty ready to go and then come to seek that federal funding. So my little cliche now is measure twice, cut once. Make sure you're really ready to go when you come in the door, but we're ready to help you get there.
That's a good adage for many things in life. So I want to just take a moment and have us all thank the Deputy Secretary for taking time out today, being with us in Dallas, and sharing some of her thoughts and wisdom and advice for our community. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to have you here, and we look forward to you exploring a little bit about the technology solutions.
Well, and thank you, Laura. Thanks for all your leadership.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Please welcome to the stage ITS America Chief Operations Officer, Kristen White.
Well, howdy, everyone. Come on, y'all. I hear we're in Texas. When we say howdy, you say? Howdy. I got a Texas-sized pen, and I was taking notes on what Secretary Trottenberg told us. And so I just want to thank you all for joining us for what I think is going to be a really phenomenal panel with diverse public and private sector perspectives to talk about what we heard from this Undersecretary Trottenberg, sustainable, equitable mobility, and the intersection of technology innovation. So we're gonna have a wonderful panel, and I want to introduce them today to talk about this collaboration that Polly talked about, which is this intersection of public and private sector coming together towards common goals. And you're gonna hear a little bit more about what that means to us on the topics of sustainability and equity. So please join me in welcoming, to my left, we're going to start with Eric Chagnot. And Eric is with Microsoft, and his is a really interesting title. He's the General Manager of Data and AI and also has an automotive background. So we're gonna wait and welcome everyone. Next to his left is the amazing Candace Cluck, who is the Managing Director of Moving On at Michelin, and we'll talk more about this partnership that you see up here. We have our colleague Rahul Gupta, and Rahul is the North American Lead and Technology Delivery Manager at Accenture. To his left is a very local name and face. At the end of the stage, we have Kimberly Williams. She's the incredible Chief Innovation Officer at the Harris County Transportation Authority, also known as Houston Metro. And of course, last but certainly not least, our colleague in innovation, Jennifer Sanders, who is the co-founder and leader of the Dallas Innovation Alliance. Please give them a round of applause for joining us. So we heard Polly talk about a few things. We've been talking about them all in some of our prep calls and conversations throughout this week, implementing innovation for all. And today we're really putting what the Secretary has challenged us to do is really making it work for everyone. And that's not just safety, transportation technologies that you saw her mention on the floor, but technologies in sustainability and equity. And so I really want to take just a moment to ask each of you what this concept of sustainable, equitable mobility and the intersection of innovation means to each one of you. And I think we'll start with you, Eric.
Sure, thank you. So I will make you get used to my French accent, so hopefully you will be able to understand what I'm saying. But anyway, so I would like to start with, in few words, the purpose of Microsoft, right? And the purpose of Microsoft is really to empower every people and organization on the planet to do more. So a short answer to your question, Christine, is that at the end of the day, the vision that we have at Microsoft is that we are here to empower sustainable mobility ecosystem. We are the foundation, the data foundation, the AI foundation that will enable all this ecosystem to be able to work together.
Thank you.
Well, I think we need to start with, if you think about the inspiration behind the Moving On ecosystem, is that, mobility is essential for the development of our communities and for society at large. So within the Moving On ecosystem, we really focus on initiatives that have the capacity to develop solutions that really strike the balance between really 4 criteria. They're safe, they're efficient, they're environmentally friendly, and they're equitable.
Absolutely. I think that sustainable mobility can be defined in many ways. We like to think that these are self-sustaining business models that serve a public purpose as well as a business purpose. So there has to be the integration of the public demand, the private sector need, with the inclusion of what we talk about when we say sustainability. That means would have to have equity, accessibility, and the environmental component. But the business component cannot be separated from the real operational sustainable mobility.
And again, good morning. Houston Metro is a regional transportation provider for the Houston region. And as many of you know, we experience significant weather events. So when you talk about sustainability, for us, it also means resiliency. Obviously, as a regional transportation provider, we recognize that we're critical infrastructure for anyone looking to move around the region. Not everyone has access to a vehicle, so we know we play an important role in making sure people stay connected to education, healthcare, employment. But in situations where we have weather events or other situations, we become that sustainable support for the community to get them to safe haven, to evacuate them in these types of situations. So I think you have to pair up sustainability also with resiliency when you're looking at mobility.
Hi, good morning. First of all, ditto as usual to the 2 panels of experts like this. I think from our perspective, we just to back up into the fundamentals on which everything we look at planning and doing collaboratively happens. We define a smart city as the one that lives in the intersection of technology, data, and community, meaning very human-centric first and problem solving at its core. And then from a mobility standpoint, a lot of the projects that we've done have focused on physical mobility, economic, social, and digital is a really critical one that I think we all have always known is a critical piece of this, but the foundational infrastructure necessary for both operational connectivity, but also obviously individual connectivity.
Absolutely. Unique perspectives, but a lot of common themes there. And one of the themes I heard is this concept you referenced, all of you, of inclusion and diversity of thought. And ITS America really echoes that. And so we want to celebrate that through tactical ideas and strategy. This year at the ITS America Annual Conference and Expo, this is the first time we've had 2 female keynote plenaries. And as we were talking coming up on stage, a couple of us noted, gosh, there's actually a few women on this panel. If you look in the audience, there's a lot of diversity of thought. And that is not by accident, as we joked. It is because it takes action. And that is what each of you has been doing in your roles, taking action, not just talking about your definitions. And so I just want to take a moment, and maybe we'll start with you, Jennifer, and then come down the line. You've been doing a lot about strategizing. You even have your own strategic plans. But what are some of the tactical actions you've been doing to implement that vision in your organization, and what could the audience learn from you?
You might need the Gong app. I can tend to go on forever. I'm going to try and keep myself on pace. But I think the one is ensuring that we know what we don't know at the front end prior to execution, which sounds simple, but it's not always easy when problems are so critical to address in a very short order. But one is initially providing the forum for everyone to come to the table, and that includes all sectors, but also includes people that maybe not traditionally. We've brought in high school students and said, what does this really look like to you on a day-to-day basis? And so how can we really make sure that the entire chain of mobility is addressed, childcare being another one that becomes a barrier. But I think from an actionable standpoint, there are a couple of sustainability-focused initiatives that we're working on actively right now. One is focused on resiliency, which started from conversations with the public sector on targets for fleet conversion, but really not knowing how in the world are we going to invest in the infrastructure to make sure that we can all get there. So looking at a hub model with different shared cost for fleets, including transit, city, county, education, et cetera, and having the private sector come along and manage that infrastructure. But part of that is a mixed generation microgrid that also has a mixed use community building. And this is looking at low economic areas near the inland port, where in times of emergency response and being able to gather as a community, proximity is key, and it does not necessarily exist there. And the second piece related to emissions, unfortunately, North Texas has been downgraded from non-attainment to severe non-attainment from an air quality perspective. And so really looking at all of the different approaches and methods requires coalitions like the City Business Climate Alliance, which the City of Dallas is part of. But finally, looking at freight as a major player in this emissions plan through the North Central Texas Council of Governments and federal funding, a freight signal optimization program has been put in place to really look at key freight corridors, which involves working with multi-jurisdictions on their traffic signals and also working with private fleets in terms of participation. We call it the easiest way to go green, lights-wise and environmental-wise. Thanks.
And I would add, we have several significant initiatives, but Metro established a climate action plan last year that we've been implementing over time, and it involves fleet transition. We recently deployed our first fleet of electric buses. Well, we haven't deployed them, we're receiving them and getting ready to deploy. But we always say that for many in the community, sometimes electric vehicles are beyond reach. And so we know their first experience for some communities, particularly low-income communities, their first experience with an electric vehicle will be a bus. And so we want to make sure that we invest heavily in making that an enjoyable and pleasant experience so that when they move to a position where they are able to purchase an EV, they're already familiar with the technology, they understand it, and it's seen as something that's for them. You often hear in certain communities that EVs are not for us. They don't see themselves as a part of that conversation. So we see in public transit an important role, not just in terms of the technology, but also in terms of education and getting people comfortable with that. But our climate action plan doesn't just include fleet transition. As I mentioned before, resiliency is important. So we are looking at all of our facilities and looking at how we can make those facilities more sustainable for the community. So we are revamping our park and rides to include electric charging infrastructure for those individuals who still use a vehicle to access our services through our park and ride system. We feel like we need to be a part of that ecosystem. And I think that is very important because we do reach a community, we reach all communities. And so again, giving that access and that awareness and accessibility to all communities, to the electric vehicle community, electric charging community, I think will be significant. The other initiative that is important towards sustainability is we have a long-range bond initiative called Metro Next. And Metro Next will expand our service by 20% over the next 20 years. And so it will reach communities that previously are underserved or don't have a adequate connection to our services. So we are very excited about that plan. It includes 11 bus rapid transit corridors, which will be significant trunk lines in the region. And what that will also do is allow us to explore technology for transit signal priority. It'll also allow us to look at how autonomous and connected vehicles fit into that system and how they'll connect at those intersections along the BRT. And it will again connect communities that have been disconnected previously. And so that's in addition to some of the other technologies that you now see as commonplace that weren't so long ago, like Wi-Fi on the service. When we did our first Wi-Fi pilot, the thing I loved when we did the community engagement where people were saying they could do their schoolwork, while they travel, they could apply for a job while they were on the bus. So that was a great feedback to get, and one of the reasons we ended up deploying Wi-Fi more extensively. So those are just a few of the initiatives that we're taking on in terms of really tactical approaches moving forward.
I like that. Connected ecosystem for all. Great language. Accenture is no stranger to this, Rahul. What are some of the tactics you're implementing, and what are some of the outcomes you're seeing?
Absolutely. So being a global firm, we strive to link the thinking to the doing. So we just published a technology readiness that you can visit and understand how the world is evolving and what are some of the key areas that are going to be important on the operational side. And capacity building is extremely important. So taking the outcomes, taking the leading practices globally and feeding it back to the client, I think is important. Because when you're taking on sustainable mobility, as Kim just explained, you're going to touch water, power, road. You're going to talk about customer behavior. You're talking about the propensity to either buy a certain way or behave a certain way. Linking it all together is complex. You are really talking about the innovation that is working faster than the capacity to change policies and to change the way we procure and we buy. So educating the client and creating that capacity building is core to what we do. The second thing that we are seeing in sustainable mobility is the need to link some of the corporate metrics to how you're going to execute the plan. So you can have membership in ESG, you can have your corporate standards, but what does that really mean on the ground? Does that mean you're going to produce more power? Does that mean that you're going to make that available in neighborhoods that currently are not served properly? So for us, providing that capability and then providing that opportunity to link different infrastructure assets together, educating the client how to think of it in an ecosystemic way is what we are bringing operationally. And I think that is the piece that I see potentially core in the next 4 or 5 years while the IIJA funding is still available to really make a difference in the United States. So when we go from infrastructure 1.0 to infrastructure 2.0, what will it take to go from the thinking, which there's plenty of it, to the doing? And that's the key, I believe, to really create a sustainable business environment.
Candace, everyone keeps talking about an ecosystem, and you are no stranger to that. What are you working on?
Yeah, just jumping on that, it's important. We do have a lot of thinking and a lot of really good ideas that have been generated, but moving on is a co-innovation platform at its core, and so therefore we're really focused on tactically on topics where we see a convergence of challenges that have been brought by our members, by our partners, and by which we think some of those challenges can, through a co-innovation process, illustrate a solution that can be scaled into a larger project. So that said, when you think about the convergence of some of those challenges, if we think about globally, we definitely have a lot of activity in the ecosystem around maritime decarbonization. That's a really complicated space. You have not just the ships themselves, you've got the ship to shore, you've got the port to inland warehouse and everything in between. And so there is really no one and done answer there. So we have communities of interest, 5 or 6 across the globe that are working with different ports to tackle that subject from different angles. One in particular that comes to my mind is led by CMA, CGM, and the Port of Marseille, and they just successfully delivered a prototype of a hydrogen refueling facility. So that's something, again, a really good example of how we want to see that scaled into a larger project. And another led by the city of Dunkirk. So it's another one of the first of its kind championed by a public agency. And the city of Dunkirk has a massive employee population that they have to identify what's the right mobility mix to move those employees safely and efficiently throughout all of those port activities. So maritime decarbonization is a big one. Another one where we see a good convergence between the EU and the US is this question of equity and access to mobility options for low-income communities. And so in particular in France, we have a number of initiatives, again, that are championed by the French government to really address better mobility modes, options, services for these communities that live outside of the city centers. And then another that we are just kicking off with the Broward County MPO in a grant-eligible area for the same thing, to make sure that those communities that are so essential for that economic flywheel in Florida have access to those quality of life services. And then I would say finally the third one is supply chain. I mean, supply chain isn't going away, and there's lots of room for improvement there. And DHL, who's a very, very active Moving On partner, is leading a number of different initiatives across that to try to attack that value chain between Europe, Singapore, which its primary focus of the Moving On lab there in Singapore is on supply chain, and then also we just kicked off a supply chain topic here in the U.S. with Michigan Central a month ago.
Thank you. You know, Eric, Candace mentioned some French examples. You are French, and I actually have French heritage. How do we bring that exceptionalism here to America, and what is Microsoft doing to do that?
Yeah, so I'm French and American, so I have both. I could say good or bad thing about both. But anyway, what I would like to share before, based on what the panel said, is that we are convinced that to build this sustainable mobility ecosystem, then we should be able to build, to have technology enablers that will enable all these stakeholders to be able to work together, on all new set of services. But then there is some keywords that we use at Microsoft in a trusted way, cyber secure way, and also respecting all the privacy of the various stakeholders. So at the end of the day, to some extent, that's the role that we play, right? Really an enabler for all the stakeholders to be able to build these new mobility services. Now I'm going to take two concrete examples of what we are doing, right? The first one, I encourage you to take a look at this website. Can I do that? Mm-hmm. It's a foundation, so it's called eclipse.org. Please take a look at that. So we're a member of this community. And if you think about cars, trains, airplanes, everything, boats, everything that is moving, right? There is a huge revolution that is underway now. So if you think about that cars a few years ago, the way people will create cars, they will work on the hardware first. So they will build the hardware of the car. And then, along the way, they will start to build the software that will enable, the car to be able to run, right? The revolution really came from Tesla, right? If you take a look at Tesla, at the end of the day, Tesla is a software company who is making hardware. But the Tesla is a software, right? It's software-based. So anyway, so the goal of the Eclipse Foundation is really to work on what we call software-defined vehicles. So completely rethink the way you design vehicles, right? And everything starts from the software. So it's really a software work. And then after that, you will build the hardware, the car or the trucks or the train that will be able, to use this software. The way we build that, talking about community, it's an open source foundation. So everything that we do, everything that we contribute, guess what? The community is able to leverage that. So could be OEMs, we have car OEMs, tier ones, we have, all kind of actors who are playing in this space. And we are convinced that by doing that, cars, vehicles, trucks, buses, then they will be able to interact much more with the cities, the infrastructure, the energy companies, you name it. And we're convinced that that's the only way, to build mobility ecosystem. So again, an open source approach, take a look at that. You can be a member also, and we don't have shares, right? It's really an open source, it's a non-profit company. So that's the first example I would like to give. Again, take a look at that, it's very interesting. We made some announcement with General Motors 4 weeks ago, and it's a revolution. General Motors, they are building some open source software, but also they give everything back to the community. So that means that their competitors could leverage what GM is doing, which is, for me, anyway, something amazing. The second one is Candace and Raul, etc., is around moving on. So we have been working on moving on for some times, and we got attracted by moving on because we really believe that the values of moving on, they are very close to the value of Microsoft. And we are convinced that the only way to resolve these sustainable mobility challenges of the world is by working together. No company will be able to do that on their own, even Microsoft, which is a big company, but even we know that we have to partner with OEMs, tier one, cities, government, private, public, to be able to tackle these challenges. So why do we do that? Because we are convinced that, we all need to work on these sustainable challenges. But then the second thing is that by doing that, we learn from all our partners. We learn what do you need, what are the challenges that you have, what should we bring, on our platforms that then everybody will be able to work, on the same environment in a trusted way. So again, we'll talk about some example of moving on after, but that's two example of what we're doing.
And what a tie-in from yesterday's conversation about digital infrastructure and sharing information. And I want to pivot a little bit because some of what you talked about, Eric, was bringing people into this ecosystem. And Kimberly, you are such an exceptional leader, not just in Texas, y'all. You do things better in Texas, but you're such an example for all of us across the globe to learn from when it comes to, and you brought this up in your opening remarks, resiliency. Resiliency is not just about technology and the cool things happening out here in the expo hall, but it's the people that are building them and maintaining that. And you're doing some really interesting work on how you're building resilient and sustainable systems, but also enabling your workforce to think about the future. Could you give us a little insight as to what you're doing?
Yeah, absolutely. One, you're too kind. Thank you very much. So a couple of things that we're doing. I mentioned our Metro Next initiative, where we're looking at our facilities and kind of creating resiliency hubs for communities when they're dealing with whether it's weather events or other situations that might occur. Some of you may or may not know, but Houston has had 8 FEMA declared weather disasters in the last 8 years. So we're seeing 500-year storms like every 5 years, it seems. So these things are really critical that we need to address now rather than later. And so that has been one piece. But one of the things we've been doing is, as you know, public transit is built on ridership. That's usually where resources are allocated, where dedicated bus routes are located, light rail lines are located, et cetera. But we recognize that in order to really serve equitable communities, we have to really look beyond ridership. And what we've deployed is a microtransit program in Houston that looks at communities that may not have infrastructure or may not have ridership for a dedicated bus route, but still need service. And so we have partnered with a technology company. I think I can name names, but RideCo is our provider. We took that route because we have the operators, we have the vehicles in the region to operate, to provide that service. And so we're in communities now that are considered underserved and able to offer them a service throughout the day, and in many cases, late night service. The nighttime economy has become a growing challenge for transit agencies, providing that service for individuals who work shift work versus the traditional 9 to 5. So we're very proud of that program. Has been very successful. But one of the things that we see our role in sustainability is getting single occupancy trips off the road. If transit can do one thing, if we can get some of those single occupancy trips off the road, that is critical for what we need to do to help with sustainability. So we have partnered with the Texas Department of Transportation, who received a federal grant to deploy a complete trip app called Connect Smart. You can go to your phone now and go to the App Store, go to the Android store, and you can download Connect Smart today. And that complete trip app allows you to pull up the trip, pull up your destination, see all of your options, whether it's a personal vehicle, whether it's TNC, or whether it is hopefully Metro Transit for your trips. And it allows you to see all those options. It allows you to get the pricing information, allow that rider to make a choice about what trip they want to take on what mode, and to pay for it through the app. So it is available and active, but it is still developing. We're adding more functionality to that each and every day. But we think giving users that information allows them to better control and manage their trip. It makes it easier, more seamless trip for them to take. So I encourage you, if you have a moment, you can download Connect Smart and play around with it. It is only in the Houston region, so you got to come to visit us to use it. The other thing that we have invested heavily in is automated vehicles. We recognize that first and last mile connectivity is critical for individuals needing to get out of their communities and make connections to their public transit assets. So we were fortunate to have a successful autonomous vehicle project in an underserved community called 3rd Ward in Houston, Texas. We created an automated mobility district in that area. We are fortunate that that area also has 2 universities, the University of Houston, which is a 40,000 Carnegie level research institution. And then right literally across a major thoroughfare is an historically black college university, Texas Southern University. So we were able to work with the faculty at both institutions to deploy our autonomous vehicle project that unfortunately discontinued due to the pandemic, but was extremely successful. Successful enough that we were fortunate enough to get a Federal Transit Administration Accelerating Innovative Mobility Grant to continue that project into phase 2, moving into mixed traffic and then connectivity between those communities and the transit assets, which include a light rail line, a high capacity bus route, as well as our park and ride system nearby. So we're looking at autonomous vehicles not just for the sake of, but also looking at how these operate and connect to underserved communities. Will they use it? How will they use it? And better understand that connectivity. The other benefit, because they are traditionally smaller vehicles, we can get into other areas that maybe a fixed route cannot. So thereby expanding service in an efficient and economical way. The base vehicles for many of, I think for all of the AVs that I'm aware of, are all electric vehicles, so you have that zero emissions component as well. So we really see this as where things are moving. We're very excited about that. So those are some of the things that we're working on, looking at equity and looking at sustainability going forward in terms of future mobility services for our region.
Kim, what a great use case of integrating autonomous services, a newer ITS technology, arguably, by finding gaps in the system and then leveraging ITS technology to fill those gaps. And that's exactly what we heard Administrator Hutchison say yesterday, right? It's not tech for tech's sake. It's really asking your communities, using questions and empathetic leadership to understand that. Jennifer, you raised your hand. Did you want to respond to any of that?
I wanted to respond to the workforce piece of some of these tactics. And so one thing that we're working on right now is understanding the gap within some advanced transportation technology and what's coming through there. So one being around electrification from a skilled labor perspective, and also things like fiber splicing and 5G, which are critical. And so we're working with multiple levels of education to look at those rapid cert programs, working with the private sector on where do you see the most rapid gaps to being able to spend this federal funding. And so that's one piece that we're working on, it because some of these underserved communities, if you're working construction, it might be $32,000 a year. As soon as you have one of those certs, you're approaching $60,000, and that is a generational change, obviously, service that we can provide. So we're really working to develop that. And then there's a fellows program that is literally called the Sustainability Fellows Program. And what that seeks to do also is developing interdisciplinary teams, not just across schools and focus like public affairs and computer science and whatnot, but also looking at multiple levels from the standpoint of every team will have a community college student, will have a bachelor student, will have postdoc, because we want them to look at a problem in a 360 view and be able to come up with solutions that do include technical planning, financial modeling, and be embedded on a specific problem statement within a public sector institution. And what we found already from these capstone programs is, for example, the city of Dallas did a digital twin program, and that cohort, which was with UTD, 3 of them applied for open positions because they had no idea how the public sector worked and what was available to them. And so when we think about the gaps within public sector and recruitment, exposure opportunities like this not just solve problems, can solve problems both internally and externally.
Takes an interdisciplinary approach. I love that you mentioned planning, and planning is not unique to the local region, Dallas and Houston, but my goodness, Candace, you've been doing a lot of planning with Moving On. Would you talk a little bit about kind of the Moving On construct and how it started and some of the things that you're working towards?
Yeah, sure. I mean, maybe just bouncing off of Eric's last comment, and you could hear the conviction from Microsoft, which you hear from all the partners, whether it's Michelin, Accenture, and others, that in order to be able to address today's challenges, which are ecosystemic, we have to move away from verticalized innovation and we have to go to ecosystem innovation, which means we need to innovate together. So in that case, that often means bringing people to the table to innovate that don't normally work together, could even be competitors, and sometimes diverse public agencies that don't normally work together to try to break down some of those silos. Moving On found its footing in Europe, and I think maybe it bears saying that Europe has benefited for nearly a decade or more to an environment that provided funding and policy towards clean tech and sustainability. And because of that, Moving On, a business-led consortium like Moving On, was able to take hold and make a meaningful dent through different initiatives. But that innovation in an ecosystem is difficult. It's not really natural. And so if you even look at the EU, for example, in France, you have publicly funded competency centers that have been awarded millions of dollars by industry. And what we have seen is that they have struggled with the throughput of innovation in those competency centers, and as a result, can't spend the money. So this year, the French ministry engaged Moving On to come in with the co-innovation model to be able to drive that cross-industry innovation to try to increase the output of promising solutions. And so, that's resulted in probably, certainly shared innovation spaces, as well as 6 different initiatives. One that will, has already started and will really tackle, what is a net new intermediate data first vehicle solution that could serve these low-income communities, because it's not just transit. There are different modes. Not every mode is available for every area. And so we see that, that's a really good example where, the co-innovation model can really work, because you have to bring together different folks, but you have to commit to that part of the process. It's not easy.
Absolutely. So for those folks that are still with us, I took note, Candace, of ecosystem innovation and co-innovation. Yes, my Texas-sized pen is helping us today.
I love it.
Thank you to Texas. But yeah, that's not a new concept for you, Mr. Eric. And so I just wanted to hear kind of a little bit about what Microsoft's role has been, because you gave us a little bit of it. But I love this phrase that Microsoft uses, which is using your tech for good. What great language, right? And we've already talked about it a little. It's one of the themes, implementing innovation for all. You've done some really interesting work, Eric, with this combination of your automotive leadership background. And just this week at ITS America, Microsoft launched a really interesting real-time demonstration of ITS traffic signal safety using ChatGPT, everyone. And no, we did not actually plan this whole panel with just using ChatGPT. It was our own creative thought leadership. Eric, I'd love to learn more about what Microsoft is doing in this space.
Okay, but before that, I will ask a question to the audience. How many of you, can you raise your hands if you have been using ChatGPT? Please.
Wow. Wow.
That's quite a lot.
Raise those hands higher. Raise those hands higher. One more time.
Yeah, one more time. So everybody who did not raise their hands, please take a look at that. It's a revolution on everything, the way we work, the way we travel, the way we live our personal life. And you have 2 options. Either you stay on the side of the road and you will see the trend going, or you will be part of the trend. Seriously, take a look at that. It's going to change the way the workforce, everything is working. So, but anyway, but beyond that, back to your question. I think it's interesting because the vision of Satya is 3-dimension for Microsoft, right? So there is profit, okay? We need to make money, otherwise it's hard for us to do good. Then there is people, our people and the community we are operating in. And the last one is the planet. So there is really this vision that, Microsoft, it's not only profit, right? It's profit, people and planet. So anyway, one of the reasons we are part of Moving On. So we joined Moving On something like 5 years ago in Europe. And just to give you an idea of Moving On in Europe, there is 14 companies. And we have the CEOs of these 14 companies. And these 14 companies, just to give you a scale, right, they represent around 1 trillion, right? 1 trillion of revenue, right? So we're talking about significant companies. And we talk about 5 million people who are working for all these companies. But beyond these companies, we have 300, private and public organizations that are also part of Moving On, right? We have cities, we have, the energy companies, so we have a lot of companies working on these challenges. So I will just take one example of a community of interest that we build with other companies, right? So that we are leading. So again, we are leading the data, the AI, and one of the key questions that all the stakeholders they have, okay, great, we are working in community, but what's about the IP? Who owns the IP? And we work a lot on that, right? And the vision, the push of Satya is that your IP is your IP, our IP is your IP, and that's the way we try to work, in this kind of ecosystem work. But anyway, this community of interest is around a circular economy. And as you know, inside electric vehicles, one of the most expensive components, right, is the battery. The battery is very expensive. As you know, we need to take care of the planet because there is a lot of, rare materials that you could find in batteries that over time will be depleted, right? So the question was, okay, how can we take care of the battery? What can we do? How could we measure the usage of the vehicle that we're optimizing the battery, that we're certifying the usage of the battery, then the battery could have a second life, and that the battery potentially could have a third life, right? So that's the community of interest that we have been working on. And of course, data is at the heart of that, right? Being able to measure, everything along the way and being able to certify that. So we have been able to demonstrate that we're able to do that. So with data, and I will tell you the partners we work with, then we can understand what's the life cycle of this battery, how do we maximize the value of this battery over time based on the usage, and then how could we certify this battery that then it could be used somewhere else, right? When the battery is not, capable anymore to power your car, your truck, or stuff like that. So inside this community of interest, so you have the Microsoft on the data and AI side, and then you have Renault, right? The OEM Renault, right? I'm sure you all know Renault, hopefully. So Renault is part of it. You had Forvia. Forvia is a tier one. So they give materials to the OEMs. We have a bank, BNP Paribas. And the reason for that is that they have fleets and they have a leasing arm, and they are very interested to maximize the value of the vehicles that they have in their fleets. And also it's interesting because we have a startup called Compredict, and we are leveraging their algorithm in partnership with Microsoft to really be able to understand what is the life cycle of these electric batteries. So that's a tangible example of what we can do together. And the other thing I would like to say is that you know what is a Sherpa? The Sherpa is the one who carries the bag when someone wants to go on top of the Himalaya, right? So anyway, so I'm the Sherpa, of the CEO, on the Microsoft side. So I'm part of all this meeting between the CEOs. And let me tell you, it is fascinating. Because, so they start to know each other very well by now because, they did that now for years. And then the biggest challenge that we all have, right, at the end of the day, is allocation of resources, translation, budget, and people, right? And the second thing, having the willingness for people to be able to work in this ecosystem environment. So it's very interesting because when we have a given problem, I'm in the room, I'm listening, and then all the CEOs, they start to talk together, and then they say, okay, how should we start that? Okay, so how much money do we need to invest on that? Okay, and then I swear, in not minutes, but in 15, 30, 40 minutes, guess what? You have 3, 4, 5 of them who will agree, and on the spot, they will agree to allocate money, resources, and then to make sure that we are going to work, in an ecosystem. And I really believe that, that's key, having the buy-in from the top, because working in ecosystem is not easy. Let's not fool ourselves, but having the buy-in of the top, the allocation of resources, really enables us to go fast. So anyway.
I love that analogy, Eric, about leading from the top. And you are a Sherpa, but I don't think that all of this innovation is Mount Everest, everyone. I think we're a little bit closer there. I want to do 2 more polls before. I have a question for you, Jennifer. So hands raised, and I'd love even our panelists to raise their hand. Who here represents anyone in the public sector, any level of government? Raise your hand. Okay. Who here represents someone in the private sector? So it's about 50-50. And what's interesting, Jennifer, is you've been navigating that ecosystem innovation, as Candace called it, in your Innovation Alliance. I would love to learn how that model has been developing for you, because as Eric noted, it can be challenging bringing different partners to the table and agreeing on outcomes together.
No, it's a great question, and I think the first piece was we were really blessed when Dallas Innovation Alliance was formed in 2015 from a timing perspective. It was just my co-founder, Trey Bowles, who may or may not be in here, but he's a serial entrepreneur, and he told me after we were starting this up, he said, I have never seen one fall into place like this. So there was really a blessing there from the standpoint of President Obama's historic investment, the DOT challenge, all of these pieces alongside a lot of our corporate partners standing up their verticals at the same time around smart cities. And so getting people in a room at the inset and having those elected champions, corporate champions kind of lead the way was not a challenge. But when we came together and said, it's again, these are simple but not easy things. But when we get in a room and we say, okay, we're going to pick 5 use cases, and together we're going to talk about why they're important to each of our sectors, and then we're going to figure out what swim lane we stay in, because the important thing is to move this very, very quickly at a pilot scale. And so I ended up working with our Living Lab, 11 concurrent projects. I worked with over 20 departments at the City of Dallas. And a lot of those folks, you get them in a room. This is my absolute favorite thing. When you get people in a room and you say, first thing, is there someone in this room you've never met before? Everyone raises their hand, that's what you want. And then say, who has no idea why they're in this meeting? And you'll get a lot of people at the inset that are like, I got told to come, I'm in fill in the blank department, this has nothing to do with me. And by the end, as you talk about that integration, the need, one investment can solve for multiple departments' problems, et cetera. At the end of it, they go, okay, I get it now. And you see the click. And then that really helps facilitate how can we make everyone look better with less? Because I have never talked to a city, really, or a company that says, shoot, my budget's more, I have too much money, too many people, and too much time. And so really our goal is by bringing experts into the room, and our corporate partners are key to this, because again, the public sector departments, the training up on this new technology do not have the tens and tens of hours of time. And so I say, I'll find the smartest person I possibly can to come in and help us all to really understand what we need now and save a lot of that time. So again, it's figuring out the common win and the vision, and getting people in a room that have no idea why they're all there.
No idea why we're here, and not even knowing anyone in the room. That's kind of the theme of ITS America conferences, except that we have themes like implementing innovation for all. And I know many of us are here and on the floor. You can hear people networking on the floor, because our challenge is to find a connection that we haven't made before. And Rahul, that's what you've been doing for a lot of us in this industry, is finding these connections. And so I just want to kind of ask you, as one of the champions, and Rahul was instrumental in kind of the formulation of this panel concept for all of us today. You've been working on these 5 goals that Candace mentioned. I want to reiterate them. The moving on vision, which is zero emissions, multimodal mobility, universal mobility, efficiency, and preserving resources. Okay, I'm going to challenge you, Rahul. If you could craft that 10-year vision for sustainable, equitable mobility using ITS technology, what would it be, and what would we have achieved if we implemented that vision 10 years from now?
Oh, look at the time. So I think that is the challenge for us all, right? And we talked about ecosystemic perspectives, we talk about resilience, we talk about workforce, we've talked about how CEOs came together. So I'll just piggyback on something Eric just said. If you are going to focus on batteries, understanding that on a yearly basis, an EV will consume about 400 or so equivalent. In the United States, we produce 4,000 terawatts. Transferring all of that to 180 million cars, especially the light-duty cars, we're going to go to about 100 terawatt. So we're talking about 3-4% of our power generation will be now powering cars. If that's the vision, the challenge to us is, how do we get there? Because it's not just about the car. It's about the software. It's about construction. We need to reimagine the way we build our roads, the way we have to put conduits, the way we have to put the power lines, the way we need to make sure that they reach every single community, that they go and penetrate in areas where they are transit deserts. Similarly, we need to have telecommunications. If we want to bring safety, which is one of US DOT's main component of success, we need to make sure that the V2X becomes a V2V that works. We just heard about the 5.9G. Okay, let's get to work. So now you have telecom that is engaged. You got utilities that are engaged. You have construction that are engaged. And all of that is data. But data by itself is not enough. It's data, information, intelligence, knowledge, wisdom. You will never get to wisdom because you're always producing more data. But the goal is to get to knowledge. You will need a platform. The platform means you are bringing data sets that don't talk to each other today, and they have to talk to each other tomorrow. Those data sets could be LiDAR, could be radar, could be optical, could be millimeter wave. Now you're starting talking about an ecosystem of players, as Eric said, that traditionally don't work together. Candace just talked about, you know what? It's hard because you want to work by yourself, you have to share IP, it's hard. And then similarly, you have to think about the consumer, and we've had Jennifer that talked about, hey, you don't know each other, you don't know why you're here, let's meet each other. That is going to be absolutely essential, because 10 years from now, if we are working in our car, not driving our car, we're getting credit for the hour commute if you're in your car, or 30-minute commute if you're in transit because it's going to be faster. You actually are able to charge that time worked because you're not driving. How did that happen? And I think that vision means that infrastructure, that digital infrastructure, it's beyond just the OSI layer. You have a business model that needs to be reimagined. The IIJ allows us to do that. It's got pieces missing. However, I think that vision ties together that co-innovation, what we are working with moving on, what Kim is trying to deliver to those who decide, I'm gonna go find work, but I can't get there. And I need to have a safe capability, and Jennifer is enabling that ecosystem. So when we start tying the different infrastructure assets that are not traditionally working with each other, that is what innovating for all actually means. And it's difficult, right? If it was easy, we would have already done it. But what you see in the show floor here are so many different point solutions, but tying it together, bringing that connective tissue together, that is the innovation on the organizational scale that is absolutely necessary. And I think that's the hard part, because that's the people side. Data will talk to each other, it's not a problem. Organizational silos, breaking those down, they're also called cylinders of excellence. How do you break a cylinder of excellence and actually make it? That's the hard part, but that's what's necessary.
And that is why ITS America is here. As Rahul noted, one of my good friends and colleagues in the Federal Highway Administration Division in California said, Kristen, we don't have silos in our industry, we have cylinders of excellence. But I think this is such a perfect way to close us out. We have heard from folks in innovation alliances locally who are bringing new partners to the table. We've heard from leaders who are using innovation to serve the underserved and find gaps in the system and using technology to do that. We've heard visionaries who are helping us understand what the future looks like. We've heard these amazing global leaders bringing these partners together and planning for the future. And of course, we've got our corporate Sherpa helping us all lead from the top. And so this is the last time I'm using the prop, I promise, but I'm going to take notes because I'm going to challenge each of you in our last short time together. We have just a minute left. What is one or two things that we need to help advocate to our U.S. Department of Transportation and federal government or Congress to get this work done? Because in 1990, 33 years ago, that's why ITS America was founded, to help us champion this innovation. So I'm going to start with you, Jennifer.
I was so worried you were going to do that. Well, so I would recommend, one, what's already happening in terms of establishing joint offices, because so many of these investments need to be interrelated across agency and across function, and facilitating maybe using that funding where it is not currently already linked. And then the second thing, and I say this to philanthropic foundations too, is when we're building something that's never been built before, we need more time and we need more flexibility in terms of pivoting when I always know I'm going to learn something and need to do something different, and putting that in a too restrictive of a box ends up wasting funds, honestly.
And I would say continuing to partnership. As I mentioned, we were fortunate enough to have an FTA grant to advance our AV program and get those lessons learned. We were also fortunate enough to receive a low-no grant, which allowed us to set up our electric bus program. And the reason why those partnerships are critical is because when you're a transit agency or a public agency, you have a lot of stakeholders, and they are usually, government policymakers on the local level who have constituents to respond to, and you have to be able to explain why they should invest and support emerging technology when, there's the tried and true, right? That's always on the table. And when they see that you have support, when they see you have a partner, when they see that you have investment from the federal government, it helps to advance that conversation at the local level, which is where a lot of the transit agencies and government agencies locally live. So I think that continued partnership and support to advancing emerging technology, like what we talked about today, is critical to keeping the industry and that innovation moving forward.
We can have an entire conversation about it, but I think I would agree with partnership. What keeps running in my head, and I've been engaged with this infrastructure piece when I was in the government starting in 93 and 97, is allowing for experimentation and leaving no community that has something to contribute to the sideline. Right now, a lot of the grants and a lot of the IIJA funding doesn't include some of the key academic institutions. And I would totally agree with the Joint Program Office, but it needs to be more than 2 agencies. I see the need for several agencies having to come together. Just imagine if we were to take the number of gas stations with 8 pumps together and scale that to charging station, it would be about 1.5 million. Where are the utilities? How are the investor-led utilities engaged? How are the universities getting engaged? I wish there would be more flexibility in the procurement and more room for innovation, because technology is moving faster than the policies. So that's where I would think 1 or 2 things that the DOTs, and some of those comments are my own, not my firm's.
And I would say similar to Raul, champion organizations that make it a priority to bring people together that don't necessarily work together. But also at the same time be very demanding that the outputs of those activities illustrate actual solutions, because that's what's going to build trust and confidence, and it's going to feed that wheel, and it's going to help us get to the place where we need to be when at the end of these next 2 years, which is some sort of durable and sustainable financial model to support innovation going forward.
So I will build on what has been said. I think they have to be obsessed at enabling all of us to build, nurture, flourish, etc., this kind of mobility ecosystem. I think that really has to be an obsession for them. But I will say that also to all of you, right? The hardest thing is to change the mindset. You all have a role to play, right? At the end of the day, we will win this battle together at building this ecosystem. So you all have a role to play. It's not easy, but we are counting, I think, on all of you, to really make it happen.
We all do better when we all do better. Thank our panelists. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you. Go that way. Yes, you can just leave those down and go that way. The Sherpa, that was great. Fantastic. I loved it.
Please welcome to the stage Director of Smart Road Team of Land, Infrastructure, and Transport, South Korea, Sang-Min Kim.
Ladies and gentlemen and distinguished guests, hello. I'm Sang-min Kim, the Director of Smart Road Team at the Ministry of Land, Infrastructure and Transport in Korea. First of all, I would like to congratulate on the successful hosting of this year's ITS America Conference and Expo. And I would like to express my gratitude to the organizers who provided a chance to promote the upcoming 2026 Gangneung ITS World Congress in Korea. This year's ITS America Conference is a very meaningful event where we could learn more about the latest policies and technologies related to ITS in North America. Especially the Daltrans Center that we visited on Monday was impressive as it efficiently manages roads in the wide Dallas area using advanced systems. The 2026 ITS World Congress will be hosted in Gangneung, Korea. Gangneung is a mid-sized city with a population of about 200,000 and successfully hosted the 2018 Winter Olympics, which was a large international event. Gangneung plans to present a mid-sized city ITS model that provides perfect mobility services through ITS, automated driving, urban air mobility, and mass across the city. Additionally, we are planning programs where you can experience Korea's diverse culture and the beautiful nature where mountains, seas, rivers, and lakes come together. We ask for your continued interest and support from the America. Finally, we have prepared a promotional video for Gangneung. I hope you enjoy it. Thank you.
You see, mobility isn't just about getting from A to B. Nor is it about simply going faster or going further. Because the essence of mobility is in opening up new possibilities for a truly different future, for a truly better life. So here begins a new chapter of mobility, redefining what's possible to redesign each and every journey. Every moment, a new discovery of a whole new freedom of movement. With innovative technologies surfing every domain of our society, so we can reach the unreachable and keep our loved ones safe. It's about barrier-free mobility for everyone, so anyone can move freely, anytime they want. All of us connected, closer than ever before. It's about a freedom to go wherever and whenever your heart desires. For journeys beyond your wildest imagination. To explore those endless opportunities and possibilities in this whole new world of mobility. So come, imagine, and experience the future of transport systems through technology for humanity of infinite possibilities. Beyond mobility, connected world. Right here and right now at ITS World Congress, Gangneung, Korea.